Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Any Given Saturday podcast, where anything can happen on any given Saturday. But even though it's not happening on a Saturday, yesterday we saw the maturation of many young men who have been dreaming about this kind of opportunity since they were little. For some people, getting the opportunity to sign on that dotted line to commit wherever they want to go play college football, at least for the foreseeable future. Now, it may not have as much of a significance as it has, 5, 10 years ago, because we do have the early signing day. But for those of you that don't know, signing day was yesterday, and we certainly have some thoughts on the signing day and high school recruiting as a whole. We're actually going to talk about those winners and losers. Of course, that will not be the only thing that we talk about as well. So you are going to be in for a good one here tonight. That O word that some people like to throw around simply does not exist in our vocabulary. So it's going to be a fun one. We're going to have a good time here tonight. And I hope you guys are enjoying those good times with me here on a surprisingly warm February 8th up here in the birthplace of aviation. So let's go ahead and dive right into it shortly. But before we go ahead and do that, guys, I need you to go ahead and help me out. It only takes a few seconds to help me out here, right? What I need you guys to do real quick, if you are enjoying the Any Given Saturday podcast, I need you to go ahead and hit that like button for me, because hitting that like button for me lets me know, A, you really enjoy this kind of content, and I would truly appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. And then also hit that subscribe button as well if you happen to be brand new to the channel to go with it. You see the size of our channel. We're not a very big channel as of right now, so we have a real opportunity to be an A1 since day one. And, there's plenty of you guys right now that are watching this channel right now that aren't subscribed. Matter of fact, 97% of you guys that watch this channel are not subscribed. So you guys are already watching. Why not just hit that subscribe button and be a part of this community, man? It would really make my heart warm as we're getting closer to that springtime where we're getting out of that bad weather, that cold weather. It would truly warm up my heart as well as my body. But like I said, and future me, this is where we dive into the first segment of this video. So future me that's going to edit this down later. This is for you. Little cue for you. You love to see it. One man team over here, by the way. National Signing Day officially took place yesterday, and while we saw most of the class of 2024 already signed, that doesn't mean that there wasn't any drama that happened on National Signing Day. But what yesterday represented, at least in my eyes, is that for the most part, the class of 2024 is solidified, and now there is a real rush to take a look at 2025 and get things secured on that front. But even though we do have the class of 2024 taken care of at this point, we now got to take a look at who really excelled not only in signing day, but also in just high school recruiting in general. So, with that being said, without further ado, let's talk about some of the winners as well as some of the losers of not only signing day in general, but also taking that hard look into what we got going on in terms of high school recruiting. Who really was a winner in our eyes and who was a loser in our eyes. And before we dive any further into this, I do want to give a quick honorable mention into Notre Dame. I didn't even think about independent teams the last time that I did this similar type of format. I did not think about independent teams at all when I was doing that. I did want to acknowledge them here because Notre Dame is recruiting at a pretty good level. Notre Dame, borderline elite in their recruiting right now. Their quality of player is really good. 2/3 of the guys that Notre Dame did end up bringing in were, as a matter of fact, guys that are considered blue chip recruits, that 4-star or 5-star designation. So the quality of player that they're bringing in is pretty good. And with 23 total signees for the program, Notre Dame ends up finishing with a top 10 recruiting class. So do want to absolutely give a shout out to the boys over in South Bend, Indiana, led by Marcus Freeman, who is a Wayne High School graduate, by the way. Go Warriors. For those that are from the Huber Heights area that may or may not be watching this right now, true, we never know. But yeah, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. And let's go ahead and start with, I guess we'll keep it in the ACC. Notre Dame not an ACC team in the sense of football, but they are ACC in every other sport. So let's go ahead and take a look at the ACC first. I want to hit every Power Four conference as well as touch up on that group of five. So let's start with the ACC. My biggest winner for this one is the Miami Hurricanes. The Miami Hurricanes, they are a program that is on the way up. In my opinion, Miami did end up finishing with a top 5 recruiting class. They recruited at least as of right now, they're recruiting at number 4 in the country in terms of their top recruits, right? So Miami right there in recruiting at an elite level. And one of the, in my opinion, the requisites for also being able to recruit at an elite level is if you're a program that is having those expectations of recruiting at an elite level, you got to win your home state. In Miami, I think Miami is, in fact, the winner of that home state right now. There was a couple of other teams that certainly did challenge Miami for that title. You know, Florida did end up getting 5 4-stars or better from the state of Florida. Florida State got 6 of them. But out of the grand total of 42 guys that ended up signing from the state of Florida that was considered a blue chip recruit, the Miami Hurricanes had the most blue chip prospects out of the state of Florida with 8 total blue chip guys. And that does also include 3 of those guys being in the top 11. They signed Joshua Trader, a wide receiver from Hollywood, Florida, and his teammate Saquon Patterson that plays safety. Not to mention they grabbed Armando Blount, a very high 4-star, borderline 5-star player from Miami Central. And he's a Miami, Florida kid, so he's staying with his hometown as well. Great recruiting cycle for the Miami Hurricanes. Now, we saw Miami in a bowl game. They lose their bowl game to Rutgers, but when you're talking to Mario Cristobal, he talked about this leading up to last season. Anything that he could get with 2024 in terms of, being in that mix for an ACC championship and possibly a college football playoff, that would have been house money for Miami Hurricanes. They were really building up towards 2025. Some of those recruiting classes that the Miami Hurricanes were able to put together, Miami is starting to see some of those recruiting classes really start to maturate. Just last year, Miami had a top 10 recruiting class in 2023. They ended up with the number 8 overall class, top 7 in the portal. Even in 2022, they were a top 15 program. They finished 13th overall, number 12 in the transfer portal too. So Miami has been one of those teams that's been really recruiting at that elite level as of right now. And I just think Miami is really moving in a positive direction under Mario Cristobal. This is a program that will certainly compete for an ACC championship. Will it be enough to surpass Florida State? I don't know. I certainly don't know. Mike Norvell is going to have that Florida State team absolutely pissed off after what happened with the college football playoff situation. We'll see what happens, man, with the Miami Hurricanes, but I love what they did on signing day. I think Miami, that might be a team to buy for 2024. Certainly, that's not a hot take if you listen to general sports media. But what I will say is going to be a little bit of a hot take, though, is who I personally have as my biggest loser in terms of what we got going on with, okay, who's my biggest loser in the ACC? And I think this is going to surprise some people, but I need you guys to also hear me out here a little bit. I think Clemson is the biggest loser if you're looking at the ACC conference. I'm going to pause for dramatic effect. Now, hear me out, okay? I need you guys to go ahead and hear me out before you go ahead, click off this video, or pound away in the comment section, right? Clemson did recruit a number 11 class in this year's recruiting class. So it's not even that Clemson is recruiting at a poor level. They're recruiting at a very good level. Matter of fact, it's not that elite level that kind of concerns me. And we talked about Miami. One of the things that I think really needs to happen if you want to be considered an elite recruiting team, if you want to have that elite recruiting class, first and foremost, you got to be able to win your home state. And for Clemson this year, that simply did not happen. Now, South Carolina doesn't have the most talent in terms of looking at the U.S. They only had 7 blue chip players, according to 247 Sports. But not only did they lose to South Carolina, who is practically right down the street, South Carolina whipped them pretty badly. South Carolina signs 4 of the top 7 players out of the state of South Carolina. Matter of fact, before I got to the top Clemson signee from the state of South Carolina, I had to put it on a sticky note because this was actually more teams than I anticipated. These are just group of 5 teams, okay? Eastern Carolina signed 2 players above the top signee from the state of South Carolina that ended up going to Clemson. 2. One of them being Yannick Smith, who was a 4-star from Summerville, South Carolina. He's an ECU Pirate. Coastal Carolina got one. An FCS school got one. They got Joshua Williams, who was number 16 ranked in the state of South Carolina. Memphis, Georgia State. And how about this one for a plot twist? Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois signed Amir Smith, the number 26 overall ranked prospect in the state of South Carolina. Gonna be a Husky up in Northern Illinois. You love to see it. How about that? We mentioned the MAC on this podcast. You love to see it. That was all before Watson Young, who's number 27. That's the top signee for Clemson in the state of South Carolina. So clearly, Clemson did not even win in their home states. And South Carolina, they had a rough year. They didn't even make a bowl game. They were not even in a bowl game, and they dog walked you in recruiting this year, at least for the 2024 class. Now, things could change for 2025. That could certainly be a thing. But I think it's even more important that Clemson really is in that elite category when it comes to recruiting high school kids because of still the lack of willingness by Dabo Swinney to use the transfer portal. Now, it would be different if they were a school that has academic restrictions like Vanderbilt, like Duke, like Stanford, like Northwestern. But even then, those schools use the transfer portal in a limited capacity. It also would be a different story if they were a military academy that's utilized as an instrument for the Department of Defense, Army, Navy, Air Force. They can't go into the transfer portal to bolster up their roster. They can't go and solidify their roster and keep guys on through the NIL game. They can't participate in that because they serve a different purpose and, frankly, many other institutions around the country. Clemson does not have those internal factors that is holding back Clemson from being able to be an active participant in the transfer portal. Dabo Swinney refuses. And I don't know why. He refuses to go into the transfer portal. And that lack of willingness to go into the transfer portal, whereas you have a team like Florida State, who, by the way, recruited at a very similar level than you and actually used that transfer portal extremely well, by the way. Clemson does not have a single player. And we saw Florida State surpass them. Clemson did not make it into the ACC championship game. Clemson did not achieve a 10-win season. So we still had spring ball. Things can certainly change after the spring ball period. More guys will inevitably enter into the transfer portal, and maybe Clemson will be a little bit more aggressive then. But with the context of their lack of willingness to use the transfer portal and the fact that they did not even win in the state of South Carolina, in their home state, They could not win in their own states where there are blue chip guys there. That's a problem. That is absolutely a problem. And it's disappointing because when I did my way too early predictions for 2024 and who I think is going to make the college football playoff, I presumed that Clemson was going to use the transfer portal a little bit more aggressively, and that just hasn't happened. So, I certainly have some concerns with Dabo Swinney and that coaching staff, at least to that point. Now, we'll keep it pushing along for right now. I want to keep it down in that southeastern part of the country for now. I want to talk about some drama that happened on signing day. We actually had some key guys that were in this class that ended up signing. The last person that was in the top 250 that still has not made his decision, or at least wasn't officially committed to a school, was Ashton Bethel-Roman. Ashton Bethel-Roman was a 4-star player. He was in actually like a mid 4-star player. He was committed to Arkansas. So he was committed to Arkansas, but then just a week ago to the day that I'm recording this, he decommits. So he opens up his recruiting, and Texas A&M, they swoop in, they flip this recruit. So Texas A&M, I have a winner on signing day and in high school recruiting as well. They get Ashton Bethel-Roman, and they're also able to retain the 5-star Terry Boosie. There was some rumblings about possibly LSU sneaking in and grabbing him at the 11th hour. No, Texas A&M held firm, and even though they have a brand new coach in there, I think Texas A&M is off to a good start. I like what I see from the Mike Elko era. Now, Texas A&M did not finish with an elite recruiting class. They did finish with the number 19 overall recruiting class when it comes to high school players. They did only sign 17 guys, though. 16 of them did end up being blue chip players. So I'm really curious to see what Mike Elko can do, because Mike Elko can prove that he can develop players. This is dating back to his time when he was the head coach at Duke. But now he has far more resources than what he could have dreamed of at Duke. I'm really curious to see what Mike Elko does both on the field and in recruiting, both recruiting in high school kids and also recruiting in the transfer portal as well. But I really like the direction of Texas A&M right now, even though they did only finish as the number 19 overall class. Being able to flip a high 4-star player certainly helps in that assessment as well. Yeah, future I think, is bright at Texas A&M. I think they might have their guy in Mike Elko. And if you have the right guy with Texas A&M, that is a place that has all the resources required to bring home a national championship. There is nothing internally, or externally, I should say, that is keeping Texas A&M from winning a national championship. It has always been internally that has stopped Texas A&M from being a serious national contender year in and year out. That might be gone. And if that's gone, watch out for Texas A&M. They could be a little bit of dark horse to win a national championship. Really like the recruiting overall by Texas A&M. Now, on the flip side, however, we gotta have a serious conversation about Arkansas. Arkansas, we saw that flip. They had Ashton Bethel-Roman. They had him. And week until signing day, they lose him, and they can't convince him to come to Arkansas. Yeah, absolutely hate to see it for the Arkansas Razorbacks. And listen, it's not even that Arkansas signed a terrible class. Arkansas signed the 31st ranked recruiting class in college football for the class of 2024. Now, you hear that, and on the surface, that doesn't sound terrible. 31st out of 134 SBS teams that we're talking about. Arkansas was in that top 25 percentile when it comes to recruiting in 2024. Yeah, it sounds fine. It sounds pretty good when you put it under that lens. However, guys, hang on now. However, Arkansas is in the same conference as 14 of the top 30 recruiting classes in college football. The SEC this year had 14 recruiting classes in the top 30. That is more That is almost more than every single conference combined. Combined, guys. And Arkansas, even though they might have recruited just fine in terms of maybe just looking at a 1 through 134, Arkansas brought in the second the worst recruiting class in the entire conference. And Vanderbilt, you take a look on 247 Sports, Vanderbilt honestly was not that far behind. And Vanderbilt is Vanderbilt. Little engine that could. We're not going to dunk on Vanderbilt too much. But that really dives into really the gravity of the situation at Arkansas right now, right? In Arkansas, it was a disaster. It was a complete disaster for the Arkansas Razorbacks. They ended up going 4-8. That also includes a 1-7 conference record in the SEC. They have losses to BYU, by the way. BYU, they had their own set of struggles. Their only wins were Florida, who also didn't make a bowl game, Kent State, who I think we can establish worst team in America at Division the FBS level, Florida International, that's a Conference USA team, and then Western Carolina, who's in the FCS. So when you look at Arkansas's wins, they didn't even beat anybody that went to a bowl game last year. So Sam Pittman, I'm not going to lie to you guys, Sam Pittman, he might be in a little bit of trouble here. This schedule for Arkansas, it might not be that easy of a schedule. Sure, they're going to have an easier start. Got Arkansas Pine Bluff, UAB. So that's two should be chalk wins, but then after that, and I'm just talking about teams that are ranked in the top 25. Oklahoma State, they got to play them on the road. Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss, Texas, Missouri on the road as well. This is not going to be an easy road. And if Sam Pittman can't get to a bowl game yet again, and they're recruiting this low again, ooh, baby, it's going to be some tough conversations up in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I'm going to tell you that. I will tell you that. Now, we'll go ahead and keep it up in the East Coast, but we'll go over to the northeastern part of the country. Well, sort of northeastern part of the country. How about Penn State? Penn State, sneakily a pretty good winner this year. Penn State, they're able to secure a top 3 recruiting class. They surpassed Michigan, and Penn State, they're chugging along. They're building up a solid program, and Penn State is going to be one of the biggest benefactors in terms of recruiting moving forward, and also going to the college football playoff. They also made a late push. They also, on signing day, got the commitment of Deshaun Burnett. He's a 2025 guy, so we might hear a little bit more about him next year, but got him out of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh kid. Pittsburgh was on the radar, and listen, they plucked the hometown kid out of Pittsburgh. It's going to come and play in Happy Valley instead. So you love that. Good ad. Could be a kid that could be a rotational player in the near future for Penn State once he does get on campus a couple of years from now. Penn State is going to be fine. Penn State is going to absolutely be perfectly fine. So I have them as my biggest winner. I didn't want to go with Oregon and Ohio State because that feels a little bit cop-out-ish. I kind of want to go in a different direction in that regard. But I'll tell you a team that has really struggled, guys, in the Big Ten. Biggest loser in the Big Ten when it comes to high school recruiting, UCLA. We got to talk about what's going on with UCLA, man. What's going on over there? Did you know in high school recruiting, UCLA has the 87th best recruiting class in college football? 87th. I'm sorry. There is no excuse to be recruiting that bad when you are out in California, arguably one of the deepest pools of talent in high school football. It's really a 1A, 1B / 1C. I mean, we talk about that top tier, California, Texas, and Florida. That's like the top 3. And California is throwing one of them. They might not be your top. It don't matter if you have your first, second, or third. It doesn't change that California The state that UCLA is in has a very deep pool of talent. And you come out and only sign the 87th best recruiting class in college football? What are we doing, boys? What are we actually doing right now, man? That is crazy. They only sign, I believe, they signed one blue chip guy, Quanzai Gilmer, a wide receiver from Sierra Canyon. Uh, he's 32nd in the state of California, by the way. They didn't win their state, by the way. Ramsacked. Absolutely ramsacked. And it's not even, they are the worst recruiting class in the Big Ten. They are recruiting below a level of Northwestern. Okay? Northwestern has a relatively new coach in there. Coach that's going to finally have his first offseason. Indiana, who definitely has a brand new coach. Illinois didn't make it to a bowl game either. Michigan State, who's been a dumpster fire. They just fired Mel Tucker. Their new coach, coming from Oregon State, going to be in his first year there. It's a problem. And I was a defender of Chip Kelly after they won the bowl game, because I truly did think that, hey, we need to really cool it on this Chip Kelly being fired talk. Because I think if he decides to stay long term, they have the right guy. I can see why some of you have an issue with Chip Kelly now. That's embarrassing. That is absolutely embarrassing. And they're going to be in for a rude awakening. I'll tell you that much when they come over to the Big Ten. I can promise you that. But now let's go into the last power conference that is still standing in the Big 12. Biggest winner for me in the Big 12 has to be Texas Tech. And listen, Texas Tech, this might set them up beautifully well. In Texas Tech, they brought in arguably they signed 21 guys, so they signed plenty of players. And they also signed one of the best classes from a quality standpoint. Only Colorado had a better quality per person per capita than Texas Tech in the Big 12. Colorado, of course, not up there. They only signed 7 guys. We might talk a little bit more on Colorado in a minute, but Texas State, man, they got themselves some dudes, bro. They signed the number 24 class in high school football for high school football recruiting. They signed the 24 best class, and that is headlined by Micah Hudson from Lake Belton up in Temple, Texas. He decides to come over to Texas Tech. Then they also, really, all of their blue chippers come from the state of Texas. Ellis Davis, an offensive tackle. Will Hammond could be the future quarterback of Texas Tech. Cheetah Olifa, Peyton Morgan, all from Texas and all on the defensive side of the ball. This is a good class. This is a good class that maybe could put Texas Tech, there was a lot of talk last year about Texas Tech being that possible dark horse to win the Big 12. If that could still be true, maybe they were just a year late on that. Maybe this is the year that Texas Tech could win the Big 12. Who knows? So, am I drinking that Texas Tech Kool-Aid? Absolutely. But I really like what Texas Tech did in a conference that I think is going to be one of the most wide open conferences in the Power 4 next season. I think it really could be a multitude of schools that could win the Big 12. And so Texas Tech setting themselves up to be the possible big dogs in terms of recruiting. They had a sizable lead over everybody else in the Big 12 for the class of 2024. That's a positive sign. That is a positive sign and a green arrow up for the Texas Tech Raiders. Now, Baylor, on the other hand, well, unfortunately, cannot say the same thing about Baylor, right? Here's the thing with Baylor and why I went with Baylor, okay? Because Baylor didn't have the worst class in the Big 12, but Colorado doesn't really focus on high school recruiting like that. That's not really Deion Sanders' cup of tea. And to be fair, also Colorado, the players that they did bring in, quality players, 4 of the 7 blue chip guys. You love that. Arizona had a worse recruiting class than Baylor, but Arizona did lose Jeff Fish to Washington, so I'm going to give them a pass here. Very unexpected to lose your coach late in that what some people would like to call that O word, more comfortably at the coaching carousel. What's Baylor's excuse? Baylor's kept their head coach. They didn't have the same turmoil as other teams in the Big 12 that are towards the bottom, of course, in recruiting. And this was really a year in which Baylor really needed a better recruiting class than what they brought in. They finished 3-7, guys. Or not 3-7, 3-9. Two of those 3 wins were one possession wins. So those are type of games that really could have flipped in either direction. So they a couple of bounces away from really being a 1-win team. And you have the type of season that you just put together right there, and you come out and you sign one of the worst recruiting classes in the Big 12 conference. And it's not going to get easier. It just isn't. They're going to take on Utah on the road. They're going to take on Texas Tech, who we identify as a dark horse. Oklahoma State, they got to play them. West Virginia, they're a pretty good team. Kansas, ranked squad. They're going to get their starting quarterback back as well. So for Baylor to get, and that's not even talking about like Colorado, Air Force, which is a good group of 5 program, Iowa State, who's returning almost all of their starters. So it's just not a good time to be alive right now if you're a Baylor Bears fan. Could be some hot seats going on in Baylor. You hate to see how they recruited. They end up signing the 67th ranked recruiting class in college football, and they didn't even sign so much. They signed one blue chip guy, and that's really it. One guy that maybe could have an impact, but looking at the guys that are that have signed a letter of intent, really digging deeper into this class, no one that really impressed me, to be honest. So I have Baylor as that biggest loser from high school recruiting / signing day. But I do want to make sure I give a little bit of love to the group of 5. And let's go ahead and talk about that group of 5 real quick. How about the team that signed the best recruiting class in the entirety of the group of 5? University of Southern Florida, baby. University of Southern Florida, the top group of 5 program when it comes to recruiting in 2024. They signed the 48th best recruiting class in college football this year, and they're going to need it. They are certainly going to need it. They end up with a bottom 10 transfer class as well. The transfers that they brought in really aren't all that encouraging, but the high school players that they brought in, baby, they brought in a lot of high school players. They already have Jonathan Eccles, who's already on campus. This is the best signing. Florida kid, IMG Academy, 4-star guy. USF just made a bowl game. And Tulane might get a little bit worse. UTSA might get a little bit worse. SMU not in the American Conference anymore. Is USF a dark horse to win the American and therefore possibly make the playoff in 2024? The Southern Florida Bulls? Ooh, what a world that we are living in, ladies and gentlemen. But shout out to Southern Florida, though. Signed the best group of 5 recruiting class in college football when it comes to high school recruiting. But on the other end, though, New Mexico, are you okay? Are you good right now? Because not only did you sign the worst recruiting class in FBS football, oh no, that's not enough. New Mexico has signed the 186th ranked recruiting class in college football. That means there are some FCS teams that are ahead of them. And there's a Davenport that might be Division II. Northern State might be Division II as well. There are FCS and I think Division II programs that are ahead of New Mexico. It's kind of like, so here's the difference between New Mexico and Colorado, right? New Mexico signed the same number of players as the Colorado Buffaloes. They did. The problem is Colorado guys can actually play. Can we really say that about the New Mexico players that they brought in? Now, they did get an interior offensive lineman from Tucson, Shakaylee Woodard, who was picking between New Mexico and Arizona. That was his 2 scholarship offers. Opts to go to New Mexico. So that's a dub. But and these other guys, it seems like it's, dart throws. Guys that do we really believe are going to be standout players in the Mountain West? I don't know. It's just guys that don't really move the needle for me. And New Mexico, New Mexico did not have a quality 2023 season. I'm pulling up the New Mexico football schedule. I don't know if I'm going to show it on here or not, but New Mexico went 4-8 last year. New Mexico went 4-8. That includes barely beating UMass in overtime, by the way. And everyone likes to dunk on UMass for, you know, justifiably, right? Very justifiably. Um, yeah, could be a tough year ahead for New Mexico, and it just always hurts to go ahead and sign literally the worst recruiting class in FBS football. Always hurts to have that next to your name as a program. But what do you guys think? Do you think that there are some other guys, other programs that may have been under the radar but should have been considered a winner? Is there a team that we aren't talking about enough that should have been, getting criticized for what they did with 2024 recruiting? Let me know down in that comment section because I'm really curious to see what you guys are thinking. That's just how I'm feeling from my way of things, right? But speaking of recruiting, there is a man that doesn't have to worry about recruiting no more, at least for the foreseeable future. Remember when we were talking about Nick Saban and Nick Saban retiring, leaving that Alabama program while he was still arguably at the top of his game right now? But Nick Saban, he's going to have a new job. He is going to have a new job. He is going to be employed by ESPN. Now, he'll do a variety of things with ESPN. That includes the NFL draft and the covering of SEC Media Days. The SEC Media Days, of course, affiliated by ESPN. That's who has, I believe, their media rights deal. But primarily, Nick Saban is going to be on the College Game Day that ESPN has every Saturday. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty excited about this. I think, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. Someone that was not as positive about this move as I was, because they thought that Nick Saban kind of has that Bill Belichick personality and just doesn't seem um, very entertaining. But I look at Nick Saban as a guy that, listen, Nick Saban has won everywhere that he has went. Nick Saban, arguably the best coach of my time, and arguably one of the best coaches of all time. I won't say he's the definitive GOAT, but if we're talking about the GOAT of college football from a coaching standpoint, you got to at least include in that conversation. That's all I'm saying. That is all I'm saying. And what's interesting is that traditionally, college football game day has typically 5 main guys. And as of right now, no one has actually officially stepped down from college game day. So we might have 6 guys. And, why I'm talking about those numbers is, do I wonder if this is going to be like that gap year where Nick Saban is going to be groomed by Lee Corso? And Lee Corso has had an excellent career on college game day. Countless, and I mean countless memories from college game day with him specifically. Is it a type of year where when we see Lee Corso groom Nick Saban and then starting in 2025, Lee Corso steps down? Is Nick Saban the Lee Corso replacement? Not maybe in terms of personality, but just, from a caliber of personnel. Makes you wonder. It really does make you wonder. But I wanted to talk about it. I was really excited about this announcement. And I just think that he's somebody that I think is going to be very insightful. I think he could explain football and how to build a program and, what's going on in various locker rooms around the country because he's been there. He's done that. And he did those things at an extraordinarily high level. An extraordinarily high level. So I can't wait to see what Saban does. And we also will get a peek of that when it comes to the NFL draft. We're not a pro football channel by any means, but the NFL draft is not too far away either. SEC Media Days, it's going to be here before you know it. We'll get a little bit of a peek of how he's going to be as a football analyst, because not everybody can make a smooth transition from actually participating in the game of football, whether it is as a player, as a coach, or as a general manager, to being a football analyst at high-level college football or at the NFL. Not everyone makes that smooth transition. I think Nick Saban could be one of those guys that make a smooth transition. And for someone that's 72 years old, I really do believe that he's someone that, hey, he could actually, I think he still has a lot in the tank from a personality standpoint and in his football knowledge as well. I'm really curious to see how things turn out. And, I always have to give the man flowers, even though I didn't like him and how Alabama was always borderline dominant during his time at Alabama, with the exception of his first couple of years. I do have to give respect to the man because what he did at Alabama simply has not been replicated. I haven't seen it in my lifetime, at least not yet. Anyways, we'll see what Kirby Smart could do at Georgia, but that's another conversation for another time. But that being said, we do get more information though on the well, it was called the Alliance, but it's not actually, technically not an alliance. More of a partnership between the Big Ten and the SEC. And I do think that they want to move away from that alliance terminology just because what we saw with the alliance. So when the SEC announced that they were going to add Oklahoma and that they were going to add Texas as well, the Big 12, the Big 10, and I believe the Pac-12 all got together and be like, hey, let's do a defensive alliance so that realignment for conferences doesn't get too crazy. So they did that. And then the Big 10 and the ACC and, all the other conferences beside the SEC decided to cannibalize the Pac-12. RIP to the Pac-12. So I think that's why they wanted to move away from that alliance terminology. It's more of a partnership of cooperation between the Big Ten and the SEC. Now, we do get more news on what this partnership could bring in terms of what we could see from this type of partnership. And while even now the details may remain a little bit on the unclear side, it might be a type of partnership where we see, leadership from both of these conferences share ideas to carve a path forward for college sports. Because in the eyes of the Big Ten, in the eyes of the SEC, we have seen the NCAA fail miserably, especially in the last 5 to 10 years when it comes to things like NIL, things like the transfer portal, things like college football conference realignment being out of control. We are living in an era right now where it almost feels like we are living in the Wild West. Now, what both these commissioners do want to mention is that they are trying to message it very deliberately that this is not a step towards a breakaway, towards a step of a breakaway and seeing what we could see, like what NCAA President Charlie Baker has proposed, creating a new tier of Division I football that could incentivize standardization in NIL payments to all student athletes, or at least half of student athletes. But this is a step to ensure that regardless of what happens, it doesn't affect, these big conferences. Like, they don't want, for example, what Eastern Michigan is doing to have a say at what happens at University of Michigan, or, whatever happens at Florida International affecting the Florida Gators. They also don't want, a most recent example of Dartmouth and their efforts of unionization. In fact, what Auburn and Iowa want to do in the future. And I think one of those things is of why they're trying to say that this isn't an attempted breakaway, because right now it's not necessarily rooted in reality, at least not yet. And it's not just because of the logistics that are going to have to take place, because the one thing that the NCAA is good for, that I should say, and what I need to point out, is that whenever, let's say, a student athlete ends up getting hurt, and that student athlete decides to sue the university for financial compensation for whatever reason, emotional distress, negligence, whatever the reason may be. It's not the university that's stepping up in these types of cases. Usually, when you have a type of case like that, the NCAA is the one that's stepping in and being that de facto shield for these universities. So that's what the NCAA, I think that's really, if they're good at anything, is good at being a shield for the universities when it comes to liability. And so if you do try to break away from the NCAA, you need to come up with a similar or better shield for any event where the university might be liable and faces legal trouble as a result of that from a former student athlete, coach, etc. This is also because it might not be rooted in reality, because it comes from a 2021 Supreme Court case ruling in the NCAA ousting case. So there's also that as well. But what we do know is that this partnership is trying to answer simple questions in terms of, lawsuit settlement and revenue share as well. So while it's in the very early stages of this partnership, I am curious to see how it ends up going down and how this progresses. So it's a very developing story. I'm very curious to see how this plays out. And if we ever get to a point where we kind of move over to that NCAA President Charlie Baker proposal, where you see that new tier of Division One, where if you want to go a little bit crazier on NIL, we could do that and deal directly with student athletes. It's a very interesting time. It's a very interesting time right now, and I legitimately hope that the leadership that is in charge right now, whether it is the Big Ten, whether it is the SEC, or over in the NCAA, I just hope that they get it right, because what's at stake is this beautiful sport that is college football. And I think the last thing that we really want to see is college football turn into essentially a minor leagues for the NFL, and just see, 5 to 10 schools dominate and be in the playoff year in and year out, and then everyone else fighting for scraps. I think because we need regulation to the NIL. While I am a supporter of student athletes getting paid, I think they should. If you're producing revenue for the university, if you're representing yourself, if you're essentially asked to be a good representative of the university when it comes to off-campus activities like intercollegiate athletics, you should be paid. You should be compensated for that, because being a student athlete, it is hard work. It is extraordinarily hard work. I was a student athlete myself, and I'll tell you what, it was a full-time job. It was absolutely a full-time job. No such thing as an O word. No such thing as that O word at all. I also think we need that proper regulation in the transfer portal as well. We can't have guys that are transferring 3 times in 4 years. It can't happen. It simply cannot happen. So, because of those reasons, I hope that the leadership for not only these major conferences, but for the other conferences as well, and also at the NCAA, Charlie Baker's in a hard spot. He's between a rock and a hard place. I just hope that they get it right, because I don't want to see the NFLization of college football. And I don't think many of you want to see that either. With that being said, though, that is all that I had for tonight. I wanted to keep this a little bit shorter of a podcast. I also want to point out that this is a great time right now where if you have a burning question that you want to ask me, let me know down in the comment section, because one, I do make sure that I do go ahead and read all of my comments. But in addition to that, if you leave me a college football related question in that comment section, I will include it in a future podcast. I want to hear from you, the people, what's burning on your mind, because what's burning on your mind and what's burning on my mind might not be the same things, and that's perfectly fine. That's okay. But if something is burning on your mind and you want to ask me, I will talk about it, especially if it's college football related. Even if it's not necessarily college football related, I might still talk about it, just for giggles, But hey, we're going to sign off for here tonight. If you made it all the way to the end of this pod, you're the real MVP, as Kevin Durant would always say. I'm going to sign off here for tonight. If you made it all the way through, first of all, thank you. I really do appreciate that from the bottom of my heart, especially because, some people might be more cynical about a channel of our size, right? Because sometimes people like to, it's like what college football fan casuals like to say. They like to say that your record is what you say you are. And that's simply not true sometimes. It's the same thing here. Just because you're a really small channel doesn't mean you don't produce good content. I'm continuing to try to produce better content every single time I get on this mic. And I hope you join me along on that journey, because I do have a passion for college football. So if you like listening to college football and you want to support a really small channel on the come up from in a college football channel that is trying to cover things from a 50,000 feet standpoint, this might be the channel for you. And if that is the channel for you, I would absolutely go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I would absolutely encourage that. It only takes a few seconds to do, and it would really make my day seeing a new subscriber join our channel. In addition, if you made it all the way through this video, then you probably enjoy it. And one way you can show that you enjoy it is going ahead and smacking that like button. That would really mean a lot to me as well. But that being said, I am your host, Jake. I'm going to go ahead and sign off for today. It's a really beautiful day where I'm at, so I got to make sure I touch some grass, as the kids would say. So with that being said, this is Jake on the mic signing off from any given Saturday. Hoping you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.